What's up, everybody? It's your man, MG Marcus Grant. Do you love On The Beat? Do you love the NBA? Well, good news. We've got a show called On The Beat NBA for you. It is every week with Steezy A. Smith talking to some of the beat writers from across the association. So be sure to check it out on the 32-Bit Network.
Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's your boy, it's your host, Calvin Domingo, a.k.a. Steezy A. Smith, and I'm not alone. Joining me, or actually today, we are going to be featuring the Brooklyn Nets on another episode of On The Beat, brought to you by the 32-Bit Network. And like I said, I'm not alone. I got a very important guest, as I like to call them, a VIG with me today. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome. He covers the Brooklyn Nets, the New York Knicks, and the NBA for the New York Daily News. But please welcome Mr. Kristian Winfield.
Gang, what's going on? What's
going on, bro? How you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It was raining a little earlier, but it's getting a little sunny out, so I might go for a run in a few. But feeling good, man. How you feeling?
Man, like I said, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling blessed. Another day, just being alive. And you talked about the rain, and over here in Seattle, I know a thing or two about the rain, but
y'all get it pretty good out there.
We do. We do, and sometimes it's I don't like it, but it has been summertime. It's been real hot. We haven't gotten a lot of it, in the past couple of months, and so I guess it's been a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But Kristian, bro, we got a lot to get into. But before we talk about the Nets, I want to get to know you just a little bit.
Sure.
So, I know you've done a lot of work. You've had experience working for Bleacher Report as a feature columnist. You've been a research intern at NBC Sports. You worked for SB Nation, Elite Sports New York. And then for the last 3 years, you've been with the New York Daily News. Like I said, covering the Nets, the Knicks, and the rest of the NBA. What's been the highlight of your successful career thus far?
Definitely this offseason. Not gonna hold you. I was fortunate enough to break a lot of the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving news this summer in terms of, the Nets not wanting to give Kyrie the type of deal that he wants. Kevin Durant potentially requesting a trade, all types of stuff. This has for sure been the highlight of my career. But I mean, I've had moments working with SB Nation where I got to interview Kemba Walker 101. That was really cool. I met him a cool today. It's been a lot of working in sports. You get to meet a lot of dope people. Get to interview a lot of people. I remember when I was my first year working at SB Nation. It's about a scrum with like 50 people surrounding LeBron James. Everybody's trying to ask him questions. Everybody's screaming over each other. And I just happened to pick the right moment where I got to ask him a question. I wrote a story on that question. That was one of the moments too. But I mean, in this field, you can't ever really get starstruck, right? Because all these guys know that you're there for work. I got to ask uncomfortable questions. And that's what I do. That's why the New York Daily News got me.
Right, and you've been doing a spectacular job, bro. I'm not even just saying that; like I mean that for real.
Appreciate that.
Of course, and you talked about having to ask uncomfortable questions. Have you ever found yourself in a scenario where you was beefing like with another player because of an uncomfortable question you asked? Maybe you wrote in a piece.
I feel like everybody goes through that in this field. Let me think.
Right.
Jimmy Butler rolled his eyes at me once.
That's my guy, man.
Yeah, I asked him about like stats and winning and stuff, and he rolled my eyes like this guy can't be serious. Robin Lopez gave me like an asshole answer before. I forget what I asked him, but he was just being an asshole. I'll never forget that.
Robin Lopez.
What else? Who else did I mean, you have to ask uncomfortable questions, right? Like Steve Nash probably hates my guts because I'm asking him every other day about Ben Simmons, about James Harden, about Kevin Durant, about all these guys, about his coaching style. You know what I'm saying? Like these guys, we're here for a job. I'm not here to make friends. We're here to do our job and to seek the truth and report it. And if my question rubs somebody the wrong way, that's why guys like Kevin can respect my job, because Kevin Durant obviously knows that if he goes out there and he shoots 60% from the field and he doesn't turn the ball over and he hits big shots, what am I going to do? I'm going to sit here and ask him stupid questions? No, I'm going to ask him about how successful he was. And if he goes out there and he misses certain shots, I'm going to be the guy that asks him, dang, Kevin, you missed those two. That's what it was. I think it was a game against the Mavericks or against the Nuggets where he had two shots at the end of the game for a chance to win, and he missed both of them. And I was the one that asked him, yo, you missed those two shots. And he's like, yeah, I mean, I got to take that on the chin, right? And then he comes back the next game and he goes for 40, right? So that's just the nature of the beast. You ask guys, you know what I'm saying? Joe Harris probably hates me because I'm the guy who writes about how he can't hit shots when it matters, right? He's the guy who misses shots in the playoffs all the time. And I write about that. But these guys know that, if Joe hits those shots, then he knows I'm writing my stories right in the opposite way. So that's just the nature of the beast, and these guys know that.
Hey, no doubt, bro. I mean, you definitely sound like an OG in the game, which you most definitely are.
Yeah.
But real quick, though, I just wanted to go back to a point last season in the Brooklyn Nets season. It was before they traded James Harden. And you probably remember this, but I remember Steve Nash was on record saying that they wasn't going to trade James Harden. And then a week later, they go ahead and trade James Harden. And so did you ever have to ask him any questions, regarding the James Harden situation? Did you get
we asked him. I mean, whether it's James Harden, whether it's Ben Simmons, right? When Ben Simmons came, the Nets were saying he was going to play, and obviously we know that he never played a game, right? And so it's just and covering the Nets is a difficult task because sometimes they won't want certain things out there, or they'll try to. It's difficult because sometimes it's the Nets, and then sometimes the player will have an agent, and the agent will want something out there that's different from what the team will want out there. So there's a lot of misinformation at times, and you kind of as a reporter, you have to choose what you want to believe or what you want to put out, and it becomes difficult. But yeah, I'm the guy that's asking Steve, hey, are you trading James Harden? No. Steve Nash was asked on the same day of the trade deadline whether or not the team was going to trade James Harden. He said no, and then the trade happened shortly after that. So it's like it's crazy, but also like, what do you want him to say? You want him to come out and say, yeah, we're gonna trade him later today? Of course, he's not going to say that. So it can be frustrating, the job in that respect for sure. But I mean, it comes with the territory.
No doubt, and I mean, I think you kind of attribute that to Coach Speak, right? Like, I talked about how I'm over here in Seattle. Obviously, you probably know about this, like who doesn't by now, but Russell Wilson, when he was traded, before that or prior to that, Pete Carroll, they asked him if there were plans of trading Russell Wilson. He said there was no intent, and then a week or two later, he's out of here.
Yeah.
And so, like you talked about, bro, it's a part of the job. And so,
yeah, the coaches, and I'm sure Steve Nash, those coaches are like the unofficial spokesperson for the franchise, right? You've got your PR people, but the coach is going to be like the face of the franchise in terms of speaking to the media. And they're not going to just go out there and say we're going to trade somebody. Like, rarely, if ever, are you going to see a coach say that. Just like rarely, if ever, are you going to see a star player come out and say my coach is trash, right? Kevin Durant came out and said, hey, Steve did an amazing job at the end of the year, and now he's telling reporters, I want him out, I want him fired. So it just goes to show you how crazy this job can be, where guys can tell you one thing one day, one thing another day, and you have to take them for their word on both days. It's just like, all right, well, whatever, man.
Man, facts, bro. And I just wanted to ask too, it's like, wasn't he the one vouching for Steve Nash? Wasn't he the one that wanted Steve Nash in Brooklyn?
Yeah, 100. Well, no. So Steve Nash was Sean Marks' guy. Sean Marks was the guy who really wanted Steve Nash. From my understanding, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving just said, okay, cool, whatever, we'll take your guy. They greenlit it, but that wasn't who they wanted. I believe Kyrie wanted Phil Handy and KD wanted Tyronn Lue. And I don't think the Nets went for either. Well, they clearly didn't. They went for Steve Nash. And, in my opinion, if you end up getting a different head coach, maybe some of the things are different, right? Maybe James Harden is still on this team. Maybe the Nets win more games in the regular season, and now they're not in the play-in. Maybe they have a different seeding, and they end up lucking out and not getting the Celtics in the first round, right? So many things could have gone differently if you hire a coach, at least in my opinion, who has some sort of experience coaching, right? You hire Steve Nash, who, I mean, amazing player, didn't win a championship as a player, right? Has no experience as a coach whatsoever. He's a player. He's a development assistant in Golden State. Now you've got him leading a team. He's learning on the job, rookie head coach for a championship. And this is not a team that was trying to like duck championship aspirations, right? They were coming out and saying, hey, we want to win it all. And you've got a guy who has to learn how to be a head coach in year one. Of course, he's going to struggle. He's never been a head coach before. And it just so happens that Sean Marks was the only person who didn't think that, who thought he was going to be great to start, and that wasn't the case.
Right, and not only that, I mean, he was kind of put in a circumstance, or the circumstances around him were not ideal. Like, he was put in a circus. When you kind of consider all things involved. I'm not saying any of the players were, the circus, but I'm just talking about the situation. But to transition over, we've had a former New York Daily News writer on the show before, and my guy, Mr. DJ Bienemy, and I know
that's my guy. I literally just texted him. I heard Sauce, the running back, defensive back for the Jets, is coming out with a barbecue sauce. I was like, yo, hold on, I need parts. Ooh. So I'm trying to get that barbecue sauce. You know what I mean? So yeah, DJ's my guy.
But I was just gonna say, well, that's my guy too, Bone. We've actually connected a few times, after we had him on the show. And so, like I said, I know he works at ESPN now. He covers the Houston Texans. Does a tremendous job over there.
For sure.
But I just wanted to ask, did you guys ever cross paths, while working for the New York Daily News?
Oh yeah, DJ's my guy. Me and DJ activated a couple times. We went out. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's my guy. We got up not too long before he took the job, and then we got up when he first took the job. So, obviously the football schedule and the basketball schedule is so different that, like, me and a couple of my coworkers, we met for the first time not too long ago just because our schedules are so different, right? So it's crazy. But DJ's cool people. Me and him, we activated a couple of times. That's my guy.
That's real dope, bro. That's real dope for real. But Kristian, one more question before we get to the Brooklyn Nets. I just wanted to congratulate you because I saw that you, and I don't know if you've already appeared on the show, but you were supposed to make an appearance on Colin Cowherd's The Herd.
Yeah, I was on there. I went on there once with him, and then I went on there once with Joy Taylor. Great time on there. This was having me on a third time, but they rescheduled, so I'll be on there another time. Probably when some more net stuff goes crazy, they'll have me back on.
Right. I mean, hey, who else would they go to for net stuff, right? I mean,
hey, I don't know. If you ain't coming to me, I don't know who you going to. If you ain't coming to me, you ain't going to the right person.
That's what I'm saying. Like, who else would they ask, right? But real quick though, bro, just to give us a brief synopsis of some of those conversations that you had with Colin, kind of plug the show. I'm not gonna lie, I tried looking up on YouTube earlier. I don't know if I wasn't looking hard enough, but I couldn't find it
on there. But that was when everything was going crazy with the trade request. That was actually before Kevin requested a trade. That was when Kyrie was having those negotiations with the front office, and the front office wasn't trying to give him the type of deal that he wanted. He took the 1-year deal. Kevin got mad. Kevin asked for a trade, and it was just a bunch of all that, and then I went on. It's been a lot of the same since then, right? We've been in the same situation with the Nets since before Kevin requested a trade. We knew that was coming. At least I knew it was coming. And it's a circus right now. So now everybody's waiting to see what happens, whether he's going to get traded, whether they're going to try to drag this into training camp. Who knows what's going to happen, man.
Bro, so real quick, you touched on how you said you knew that his trade request was coming before it actually happened, which occurred on June 30th. Did he know around the time of the playoffs that he wanted out of Brooklyn? Was it that early? Was it earlier?
I don't know if it was that early. I think it was more so as things started unraveling with, from my understanding, the way the contract negotiations went with Kyrie Irving and then the messaging after that. So you had Kyrie, after the Nets got swept out, you had Kyrie say, hey, I want to co-manage the franchise with Joe and Sean and all that. I want to be here long term. The next week, you have Sean Marks come out and say, hey, yeah, we only want players that are going to be here full time. Kyrie is a situation we're going to have to review and figure out if it best suits us or if it's suitable for us. To say that about one of your best players, to say that about the player who brought Kevin Durant here is kind of wild, to say that publicly. And then to leak to ESPN not too shortly after that you're willing to lose both of Kyrie and KD just to prove a point, basically, just to prove that you want to take ownership of your franchise. It's kind of a slap in the face. These guys, the Nets did not recruit Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. They got chosen by those guys, right? The Nets were fortunate enough to have, and that's what I like to remind people. The Nets, I remember when they won 20 games in the season, 28 games in the season, when you couldn't sell out that stadium, right? When you couldn't, I wouldn't be here talking about them because nobody cared, right? Nobody cared about the Nets and what they were doing back then when it was D'Angelo Russell and Karis LeVert and all those guys. A good team when they ultimately won 40 games, right? But weren't moving any needles by any measure. You get Kyrie and KD. Every radio station, every TV station, every newspaper is talking about the Nets now, right? The Nets are a threat to win it all every single year. And now what comes with that is you have superstars. When you have superstars, every franchise that has superstars usually in some way, shape, or form capitulates to those stars. You give them what they want, and some will say, hey, yeah, well, we've given the Nets have given KD and Kyrie what they want. Well, they want a different head coach. You put a guy in charge that doesn't, and I guess you could say, yeah, sure, Steve Nash had a crazy hand thrown at him when you consider COVID, when you consider Kyrie not being able to play, James Harden getting mad, requested a trade, getting Ben Simmons back, Joe Harris. The list goes on. But at the end of the day, we all saw the tape. We all know that Steve Nash is, if we're ranking all 30 head coaches in the NBA right now, where do you rank Steve Nash? I'm not sure he's top 25. And that's a terrible thing to say, but it's the truth. Right, there's probably 25 other head coaches in the NBA that I'd take to coach my team before I took Steve Nash, and that's just the reality of the situation. He's a first year, about to be third year head coach, had no prior coaching experience, and he's clearly still learning on the fly. And it's just unfortunate. I think he's going to be a scapegoat for a lot of the things that's going on right now. But to your question, a lot of this started with how the organization publicly postured itself against Kyrie and then ultimately against KD. And then he just, became really frustrated with the situation. He said, hey, I want up out of here. If y'all aren't going to do what I need y'all to do, I want gone. Now, to go to your owner and say, hey, I want you to fire your GM and your head coach is kind of wild, right? I don't know if he thought that was going to work, but it's tough. I do think Sean Marks is a really good GM. I think we have a good track record, or he has a good track record of making decisions that make sense. But ultimately, there were some decisions along the way, especially this last year with COVID involved, that he made and that the management made that ultimately rubbed some of these guys the wrong way. And that's why we're here right now.
But so, Kristian, I wanted to ask real quick, where do you think the Nets drew the line? Because, I mean, when KD and Kyrie did come to town, they brought DeAndre Jordan, and they ended up signing them to a massive overpay. And then you talked about D'Lo.
That was
bad. And so it's just like, I don't know, like, why all of a sudden the Nets kind of just reversed course, because they were used to giving KD and Kyrie everything, right? They mortgaged the future for James Harden. They bring in a guy, I guess, where they give a green light to in the Steve Nash. They give DeAndre Jordan $40+ million.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, was it the whole COVID thing? Was that really where they drew the line with Kyrie?
I think part of it is watching kind of how helpless Kevin Durant looked against the Celtics. That was the worst I've ever seen KD look. He looked like your average basketball player against the Celtics. Right. And from the Nets standpoint is, hey, we're going to do all this and give this guy 4 years, $198 million, and you're not going to be someone who can go out there and win us a game, win us a series on your own in a way, right? And like that series, you still had Kyrie clear. He was playing. Right. You had help. And I mean, granted, the Celtics were a really good team. You had one of the best defensive team in the NBA. They've been together for some time, you could tell. But to get swept out of the first round and to have Kevin Durant look really as helpless as he looked in that series probably was alarming for this franchise. If they're like, hold on, we're going to, give this guy all this money and do everything that he wants, and you can't get us one win against the Celtics, right? While you still have Kyrie out there on the floor, while you have all this help, that's tough. But also it has to go back to, Kyrie missing games last year after the insurrection at the Capitol. I tend to put more emphasis on that than with COVID, right? COVID, you could chalk up to, once in a lifetime pandemic that a guy doesn't want to get vaccinated against. Sure, I didn't want to get vaccinated. I've said that on record multiple times. I had to, otherwise I wasn't going to be able to go into an NBA facility as a reporter. I would have lost my job if I didn't get vaccinated. Kyrie is different, right? Multi-million-dollar athlete, and choose whether or not he wants to do something with his body when he ultimately didn't have to. The vaccine mandate ends up getting lifted, but before that, you had a pattern of him not playing in all possible games. You had a guy who missed time just because he didn't feel like the country was moving in the right direction, right? You had a guy who exhibited blatant disregard for the COVID protocols, got caught in a party with no mask on, crowded, you know what I'm saying, on camera. Why are you doing all that when you're not vaccinated, when you have to, these are the steps you have to take to be on the floor. So where the organization drew the line, I'd say it hasn't been one moment where they draw the line. I feel like it's kind of been bubbling up for some seasons now. But definitely getting swept out of the first round when you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on your team, to be swept by the Celtics, that couldn't have helped the situation either.
Not at all. And I know Stephen A. Smith isn't the only one that subscribes to this notion, but I've always been, I guess, of the mindset that whenever you have a guy as good as a KD, they're always going to be good enough to get you at least one game, right? In any given playoff series. Like we saw with AI in the 2001 finals against the Lakers. They had no chance, but you still got one win because you had that one superstar. You talked about it. You alluded to it. Kyrie, he had like 40 plus, or what was it, 36 in game one. I know he struggled the rest of the series, but you still had a healthy all-star. You still had Seth Curry. You still had some of these other role players. And so to me, it was baffling that they couldn't even get one win. Now, I know some of the games was close. I think Boston won a couple by like 1 or 2, and things along that line. But yeah, that was very disappointing. And so honestly, I'd have to agree.
That first game they should have won, but they lost that on a game winner, on a fluke game where I think Tatum gets the ball, spins off Kyrie, whirling layup at the buzzer, and that was the one they should have won. And that was the moment. Once they lost that game, I was like, oh, they're going to get swept, and that's what ended up happening. But at the same time, it goes back to roster construction. You trade James Harden, you get back Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons doesn't play. That's a roster constructed for 3 stars. You only have 2. Don't have the depth to really help you. That's why I think they would be really, really good this year if Kevin Durant decides to stay. That roster, especially you consider they still haven't even used their mid-level exception yet. They need another center. You have Nick Claxton under contract. You have Day'Ron Sharpe, who's a nice piece, but I don't know if he's a guy that's going to really make an impact against some of these teams in year 2. You need to use that mid-level on a guy like if they're able to go get, I don't know, like a Hassan Whiteside on that team, that's tough. You're able to pull off a trade for Miles Turner, that's tough. And you're able to keep Kevin Durant on this team, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons. You go get TJ Warren, you already got him. Joe Harris is healthy. You still got Patty Mills and Seth Curry. You got a squad and you got depth. And that's why, and I'm in the middle of writing this piece for the New York Daily News right now. I still feel like the Nets need Kevin Durant just as much as he needs him. If any team that trades for Kevin Durant, if you're going to meet the asking price for what the Nets want, you're going to give up so much that you might not even be able to compete at the end of the day, right? Like you're looking at some of those packages that the Suns were going to have to give. We're talking about giving up DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and draft picks. I mean, after you give up those three guys, what do you have left? Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant.
That's it.
And Jay Crowder, maybe Jay Crowder if you don't trade him too. It's not enough, right? And we look at a deal like what the Celtics might be offering, and that's what Marcus Smart. You give up Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown and draft picks. I mean, that's cool, but who's your center? Who's your point guard? Malcolm Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon hasn't played a full season in 4 or 5 years now, so it's tough, right? Except the Pelicans could put together a nice offer, but from everything that I've been reading, I've heard that they're interested, but they don't want to give up Brandon Ingram. Well, you got to give to get. You're not going to give up. You're not going to get Kevin Durant and not give up anything, right? You have to give to get. So it's tough. That's why I think that the best option here is for him to stay. And it sounds crazy, but the Nets have to do something that Kevin Durant wants, and that's ultimately. I don't think they're going to part ways with Sean Marks. Sean Marks isn't just listed as the GM; he's also listed as the alternate governor for the Brooklyn Nets on their website. And just for clarification, Joe Tsai is listed as the governor. So you're talking about the alternate Joe Tsai that you want to fire. That's not going to happen. Wow. Steve Nash, you have a better case, right? Because I mean, there were just so many more qualified candidates for that job, and they decided to go get Nash, who's still learning, right? We're talking about year 2. He's still figuring out what it means to be a head coach. It's tough. So I don't know what happens. I don't know if Kevin Durant comes to training camp and he decides, okay, well, I'm going to thug it out. I'll figure it out. Or if he decides not to show up to camp. I was told by some people that he's not going to show up to camp. I was also told, and then I read reports from other people saying he's still going to come because he loves basketball so much. But the people that told me that were like, nah, he's probably not going to come. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Man, because I was going to ask, and I know when this happened in, 2007, he actually showed up to training camp. So I wanted to ask you about how likely is it that we see Kevin Durant pull a Kobe Bryant? And because I'm with you, I think that with a healthy KD, a healthy Ben Simmons, and then a healthy locked-in Kyrie Irving, this is probably the second best or even the best team in the East. And so would winning cure all in the eyes of a KD?
I don't know. Well, think about it this way. If you went into work and you went to the person who owns the company that runs your job and you said, hey, I need you to fire my boss if you want me to stay. And he said, nah, I'm not firing him. How comfortable would you be going to work the next day knowing that your boss knows that you wanted him fired? Right? That's a tough situation to be in. How comfortable would your coworkers be working with you knowing that you don't want to be there anymore? Right? Knowing that you don't think this team can win. Knowing that, you know what I'm saying? It's a tough situation, but at the same time, this is Kevin Durant we're talking about, so anything goes. My sources have been very good to me so far, so I have to continue to lean on them. My sources have told me he's not going to show up. So I don't know if he's going to show up to camp. But even if he does, I mean, we've seen situations in the past where, Jimmy Butler requested a trade. That didn't happen. What did he do? He started cursing people out. Right. We saw a situation where James Harden wanted a trade. He didn't get one. What happened? He showed up to camp fat. And then ultimately, first time he got in front of a microphone, he started telling the media, I don't want to be here. They got to get me out of here. This situation is not tenable. That's not what you want. So I don't know. But on the flip side of it, it's like, things are already crazy for Brooklyn, right? So what's the worst that can happen? It just continues to be crazy, right? Like no matter what, people are going to be talking about the Nets. So it's a tough setup for both sides. That's why I think the best situation is a situation where Kevin Durant feels comfortable coming into work every day. And I don't know that he can do that with Steve Nash as the head coach.
And going back to your point, Kristian, you talked about, being in a situation where you just ask for your boss to be fired, with the KD and the Sean Marks. So going back to that whole situation, do you think that was more of a power play, though? Like, do you actually think that KD was trying to get both those guys fired, or was that a power play?
It was definitely a power play. There's no way he could have possibly thought that Joe Tsai was about to really go there and fire.
He wasn't going to do that.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, and this just goes back to, if you have LeBron on your team, if you got Giannis on your team, and Giannis says, yo, I don't want to play for this head coach anymore, you're firing that head coach.
Yeah,
if LeBron, it already happened. Frank Vogel got canned. I promise you that was LeBron, right? I promise you. I don't know. I would just assume that that's LeBron. If LeBron really wanted Frank Vogel as his coach, Frank Vogel would still be there right now, right? So at a certain point, you've got to, at least for the cream of the crop of stars, you do what it is that they say that they need, right? And somewhere along the line, the Nets stop feeling like they needed to, I guess, service their stars in a way. And that's where we're at right now. And it's kind of like where you have this, everyone's talking about this whole player empowerment era and whatnot. It's a player empowerment era for a reason. The players are the ones who win championships, right? But at the same time, we just watched Kevin Durant get bottled up by the Boston Celtics. And I mean, when I tell you he looked bad, we saw it. He looked bad. He did not look like the best player in the world that some would say he was, right? And that's tough. But at the same time, that's what happens when you have an imperfect roster. That's what happens when you have no offensive flow, right? I mean, the Nets were literally swinging the ball from Kevin Durant to Kyrie Irving, back to Kevin Durant, back to Kyrie Irving, trying to make something happen. Ime Udoka, who probably should have been the head coach of the Nets, could read that. And so could his defense. They shut that down with the quickness. So Nets have to have some semblance of an offense that makes sense. The roster is already starting to make sense. If they go get a big man, I think it's damn near complete if Kevin Durant comes back and you have a healthy Ben Simmons. It's just about what type of coach you're going to have. And on top of that, I mean, is there going to be a happy Kevin Durant? Yeah, I think you have to have a happy Kevin Durant if this is going to make sense for them.
No doubt. And you talk about, the cream of the crop of stars having that power. I mean, heck, we even saw Dwight Howard back when he was in Orlando with the hell Stan Van Gundy situation. Like, he had that power. And I understand he was, the cream of the crop at that time. But, I mean, if a guy like him had that power, then you would assume or presumably a guy like a KD, if he wanted at the very least just to Steve Nash to go, but then he's cool with Sean Marks, and it's like, shouldn't it have happened by now?
Yeah, it should have. But at the same time, I mean, it's tough because what type of message does that send from ownership, right? Okay, well, whatever Kevin Durant says is going to go. Okay, so but at the same time, you have a situation where, Kevin Durant's shooting coach, who's Adam Harrington, is no longer with the organization. And if you really wanted to keep KD around, you should have kept him, right? Like there's certain moves that the franchise made that were just not in lockstep with what their stars wanted. Another thing, right? Like Nets could have had Kyrie play road games at the beginning of the season. Instead, they chose to ostracize him, basically go home and figure your life out. Go home, go get vaccinated. Don't come to work, right? Which is crazy, in my opinion, right? When you could really just have him playing road games, when you know that eventually the mandate is going to get lifted. Everybody knew at some point the mandate was going to get lifted, right? It was just a waiting game. So why not let him play road games from the beginning of the season, right? If he plays road games from the beginning of the season, maybe James Harden gets comfortable and says, all right, cool, we'll figure this out until the mandate gets lifted, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a tough situation. Especially as a GM, but at the same time, it's like it's tough to build an argument against anybody because Sean Marks has done an amazing job with this franchise. I'm talking about from 2016 on. He's been, he's
the up.
The worst thing he's done was, in my opinion, hire Steve Nash as head coach, right? Because if you go get somebody else, if you go hire Ty Lue, if you go hire a Ime Udoka, if you go hire somebody who has actual cachet as a head coach, the Nets could have a championship right now. Right, in my opinion. Well, that might not be fair, right? Because Kyrie ends up getting hurt. James Harden's playing that series in one leg, and Kevin Durant still almost beats the Bucks. That's all the proof you need right there that this is the guy that you should do everything he says because he's capable of taking you over the hump. Nets aren't doing that, so here we are.
Or maybe they could have kept Kenny Atkinson. Maybe that's another, staying.
As much as I like Kenny, I enjoy Kenny. I love him he's a better head coach than Steve Nash for sure. But I think you just have to have a coach that gets the ear of the player, that commands the respect of the stars, right? Someone who's done it at a high level before. Yeah, I think Kenny is an excellent coach. Like, if you told me when there were reports that Kenny Atkinson was taking that Charlotte Hornets job, I said, yes, that's perfect, right? For a championship team, I don't think that's the right spot for him.
Okay. I could see that. And Kristian, you talked about how I might have heard this wrong, but you said your sources have been kind of split. Some of them think that KD's going to show up to training camp. Some of them think that he's not going to show up to training camp.
No, my sources have been telling me that he's not going to show up. Other reports have suggested that he may. Right, my sources have told me, there's no way in hell that he's checked out completely. So.
Well, I wanted to ask you, what do you think, or how do you think that this entire situation ultimately unfolds? Do you think Boston or Toronto caves in towards Brooklyn's asking price? Do you see a team like my Miami Heat potentially swooping in and miraculously pulling off a deal? Do you see another team coming into play, or do you see the scenario that you kind of put out there? Like, do you see the Brooklyn Nets really moving forward with this thing and trying to convince them by the end of the year to stay?
I think the Nets are going to try to play hardball. I think they're going to just wait. I think they're going to try to wait him. I think. To be honest, I think they're going to try to call his bluff. They're going to see just how nasty it can get, right, before they decide to make a move. I think that's I don't want to say I think that's the wrong move because I think having Kevin Durant on your team is the best possible thing for business, right? Like you want, even if he's not playing, having Kevin Durant on your team is still going to, like, we're still going to be talking about it, right? This team is playing. You have Kevin Durant not in the building. We're still going to be asking Steve Nash about it every single day, just like we were asking Steve Nash about Kyrie Irving every single day. It'll be a story. And that's why if you trade him, you know, what's the alternative? The alternative is getting, you know, Jaylen Brown, who's a good player, but I mean, we're talking about someone who's 2 tiers below Kevin Durant, or somebody in that ballpark. The alternative is a downgrade. The alternative is, okay, well, going from knocking on the door of a championship every year to slowly becoming forgettable again, right? And I don't think the Nets want to go back there. And that's the sad part, is that seems to have gotten lost in the sauce, right? Like, you used to be a team that nobody talked about, and now you're dominating headlines and you have a chance to win a championship every year. But for the sake of, quote unquote, taking control of your franchise back, you want to surrender that all. And that's just a tough sell to a lot of fans. Tough sell. That's just a tough thing to think about. Like, yo, you had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and now you're potentially about to have Ben Simmons and role players. And that's tough. I'm hearing Ben Simmons looks good, but I mean, what is that going to win you?
Well, hey, 1,000, bro. We're going to touch on Ben Simmons, but I want to ask this, or I kind of want to just put this out there. But everybody always talks about how Brooklyn has all this leverage, right? Because KD signed a 4-year, $198 million contract. Sure. That's not really the only, I feel like, leverage that they have. You also look at the fact that, okay, Houston does own their next 5-6 drafts, but at the end of this upcoming season, it's a pick swap. And when you look at Houston, they're still years away from contending. And so Brooklyn could look at it from the standpoint of, okay, let's say KD does hold out. He plays, hardball back. And let's say Kyrie is eventually traded and it's just Ben Simmons and a bunch of those role players. If Brooklyn ends up being a bad team, Houston's going to be a bad team. Even if they have to, swap picks, they're still going to get a top 5, top 3, maybe even a top 7 pick. And so for me, I'm really just reiterating and strengthening your already strong argument that Brooklyn is not only the best spot, but just logically, it makes the most sense because Brooklyn, they literally hold all the leverage. The only leverage that KD really has is the fact that he's a superstar, and I don't think he is, in my opinion, but he's still a top 2 player in basketball. And so honestly, I see the situation playing out exactly how you laid it out.
I think that's what the Nets are going to do. And it's unfortunate though, because like now think about the precedent this sets the next time you're trying to go get a star player, right? You try to go get a star player next time. I'm like, oh, well, look at how this happened with KD and Kyrie. Why would I want to come here? Right. And it's tough from that standpoint. But if you're going down this path, then you're going to be developing your own players anyway. Right. You're going to be building through the draft. But what it really is it's just setting you back unnecessarily. It's setting you back multiple years. If you end up going down this road and trading Kevin Durant for pennies on the dollar, you're not competing. You're never going to beat the Bucks in a 7-game series. You're never going to beat the Miami Heat in a 7-game series. The Boston Celtics just swept you with KD and Kyrie. What are you going to do with them? Right. So it's like what you're supposed to do is create an environment that the stars want to be in and then add on to that talent. I think TJ Warren was a great pickup. I think Royce O'Neal was a beautiful pickup. I don't know what we're going to expect out of Edmund Sumner. You still have that mid-level. If you go get a center, the roster makes sense. You still got Patty Mills, Seth Curry, Joe Harris coming back healthy, Kyrie motivated on a 1-year deal, Ben Simmons healthy. KD comes back to that, and that's the best-case scenario other than playing with Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, and all those guys. If the Celtics don't give up Marcus Smart and still get Kevin Durant, I think that's a sweep. They're gonna destroy the league. But any other situation is going to be tough. But at the same time, I mean, you're a star, and Kevin Durant, you won an organization. You're not a star, you're a superstar. You're one of the best players on the planet. Last year, after the Olympics, you were considered the best basketball player on planet Earth, right? As a franchise, you're supposed to do what it takes to keep that guy happy. That hasn't happened, and that's where we are. So it's tough. I don't know how this plays out, and I wish I did because that'd be great for me. But I don't know how this whole thing pans out. But my gut tells me the Nets are gonna just drag it into training camp as opposed to try to trade him soon, because they're not going to trade him for the Rudy Gobert trade. Really messed a lot of things, man. Because I was just revisiting that trade. I mean, for them to get 4 players, a fresh rookie, 4 pick swaps, and 4 picks and a pick swap for Rudy Gobert, who's as good as he is, he's a one-dimensional player. What the hell can the Nets ask for? The Nets might as well ask for, the
world.
Exactly. That's what they've been asking for, and no team is going to give that up, because if you give up the world, you can't win the championship anymore. So
that's what
it's a tough spot for them to be in.
And it's just real funny because, like, with a Gobert, essentially it was 5 first-round picks, because one of the rookies that was included was just drafted. You know what I mean?
Too, yeah.
It's just wild because I think about, not only is he one-dimensional, he gets played off the floor. And so now you have him and Cat. I mean, I'm rooting for him because, the Timberwolves, obviously, they haven't had a lot of success, but it's like, what was the market for Gobert? Like, what other teams out there was willing to throw 4 or 5 first-round picks? And so they were bidding against themselves?
Yeah, I don't know what the market was, but they didn't want to.
It wasn't that.
They didn't want to know. They were like, I hear. And I was looking back at those players. I mean, Patrick Beverley is a nice player, but I mean, come on, he's not really. He's a rotation player, but he's Patrick Beverley, right? Malik Beasley is a rotation player, but he's Malik Beasley. Leandro Balmaro, I mean, I don't know what ththey're getting in him. Jared Vanderbilt could be a nice player down the line. But right now, you're getting a bunch of,
unknowns,
players coming off the bench. You're not really getting very many starters for and a multiple-time All-Star defensive player of the year. It makes sense. But it's just if that's what you're getting for Rudy Gobert, right, then the Nets are right in asking for that. They want an all-star. For everything that I've heard, they want an all-star. They want, other role players, and they want draft compensation. And for KD, hell yeah, that's what you want. You really want another superstar, but you're not going to get that. So you got to settle for somebody like a Jaylen Brown, somebody like I thought the Pelicans were going to try to offer Brandon Ingram. I was having this conversation on I Am Athlete the other day. I was like, yo, if you're the Pelicans, you have an opportunity to get Kevin Durant and it costs you Brandon Ingram and some role players. You do it. You do that right now. That means you better put CJ, Zion, and KD on the floor together. If I'm Zion and you're not doing that, something's wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's crazy. But man.
That's just wild to me, bro.
Yeah.
Real quick, before we hop over to Ben Simmons, I just wanted to ask, bro, if there's a team out there that you see could potentially, if there's a team out there that could potentially sneak in and kind of just steal Kevin Durant out of nowhere, you know how like a lot to Oklahoma City, swooping in and getting to Paul George. What would that team be?
I don't think there's another team that's gonna want to that meets the criteria, right? Like the team that would swoop in would have to be the Pelicans somehow, like ramping up efforts to get them. Because everybody else, the Suns aren't in the mix anymore. Maybe the Sixers, but what are the Sixers going to offer? They don't really have very many draft picks. You got Tobias Harris, Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle. If I'm the Nets, that's not enough, right? When I could get a Jaylen Brown or like if I'm the Nets, I want the best individual talent that I can get so I can pair that with Ben Simmons and with Kyrie Irving, right? To make a real big three. Tobias Harris isn't making a big three. He's not even making waves in Philadelphia. It's unfortunate, right? You have multiple opportunities with Jimmy Butler and with James Harden. He's been the Sixers have been trying to move him forever now, right? Nobody wants that. So it's tough. I don't think the Nets want that. So it would have to be a team like it depends on the star, right? Maybe the Jazz, not the Jazz, but I could see some sort of situation where the Nets get Donovan Mitchell and they just blow up the whole roster because you'd have to trade Ben Simmons for that to happen because of the CBA. So they'd make multiple trades and end up with Donovan Mitchell and a bunch of pieces. I could see that happening. But it looks like the Jazz are trying to do something with the Knicks right now for Donovan Mitchell. It's tough. I don't know because, like we said, to get Kevin Durant, you have to give up what makes you a contender. And I think these teams are smart enough to know, well, we're not going to do that. So.
Especially, and we've talked about this numerous times, but especially after what we saw in the playoffs. He had a healthy star and some role players. And actually, amongst all the teams that Boston played in the postseason, Brooklyn actually had the most success as far as points per game and offensive efficiency. And so you had all that going for you. You still got swept?
Yeah. Like, well, that's what happens when you're missing it. Like that team is built for 3 stars, right? They're supposed to have if James Harden was there, I think they could have won that series, right? If you have somebody else set them up, that series goes differently. If Ben Simmons was healthy, I don't know that they win that series, but they at least win another game or two, right? It's a competitive series. But it's tough, man. It's really tough. So that's why it's like, man, like part of me says, hey, y'all should just run it back. But at the end of the day, if KD don't want Steve Nash there, you can't blame him, right? And that's where we're at with it.
Well, speaking of Ben Simmons, Kristian, your last article was actually about Ben Simmons and what Stephen A. Smith had to say about him this past Monday. So I just wanted to ask, bro, do you have any additional insight on the Ben Simmons situation as far as his mental and physical health? Have you had a chance to speak to him yet? And how do you see him fitting in Brooklyn with the circus that is the KD and Kyrie drama?
No, I haven't had a chance to speak to Ben Simmons yet. Haven't seen him anywhere. I've heard he looks good, but you sometimes you hear things, but you want to quantify them with your own eyes. I haven't seen him play or anything. But it would make sense that he's healthy now. When you think about it, he's been away from the game for a year and some change now, right? Like he got an epidural in his lower back, I think in like March, and then he had back surgery this offseason, but it was a minor procedure, not a major one. So he recovered from that. And I'm hearing that he's moving well, and that's what you want. But at the end of the day, and this is my biggest concern, especially with guys who have back surgery, the Nets want to play this man at center. You want to play this man at center against like what's going to happen when he plays center against Joel Embiid, against Nikola Jokic with back problems? Them joints going to flare up again, right? So it doesn't really make much sense to me. I'm not in the room though, so who knows? I think he makes more sense as the point guard, and you get a real center out there to do the brunt of the banging down low. But that said, you put him on the floor, he's going to be able to defend the other team's best player, right? He's going to be able to make plays. He's going to be able to get out in transition, push the pace. As much as I love James Harden, he was moving at the speed of a snail, right? The pace was literally. And when you put Ben Simmons on the floor, everybody is moving about 10 times faster because he creates plays in transition. So I like the fit with the roster. I don't like the position. I don't like him at center. I like him more so as a point guard, but I can see him as kind of playing that center role on offense, at least being that like a Bruce Brown in a way, right? Playing that type of role. But it's tough because we just saw what happened with Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. signed a fresh deal and got hurt, right? He's just back injuries don't go away like that. And now you're telling me you traded James Harden for a guy who just got back surgery and potentially could need another one, right? What if his back issues flare up again? Then what, right? So it's tough, man. And it's in a tough situation. That's why you need Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant's in a tough situation because the market doesn't really want him because the market would love to have Kevin Durant, not at the price that the Nets are asking. So it's looking like this is probably going to get dragged into training camp, which means Kevin Durant is probably going to have to get messy if he wants it to leave, if he really wants to get moved. But being messy is going to be a stain on his legacy in many ways. So it's a tough situation for everybody involved.
Facts, bro. And just a couple questions here before we do wrap it up. If KD and Kyrie were to be traded, do you see the Brooklyn Nets wanting to build around Ben Simmons?
They'd have no choice. They'd have to. And that's crazy that you have to now build around a young player who has a history of back issues, but they'd have no choice because that's what you've got. You traded James Harden for Ben Simmons, right? The best you're going to get in a Kyrie deal, if you're not taking back Russell Westbrook at this point, is probably Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. You could probably flip that. You could probably get that. You trade KD, it's looking like the best you're going to get is a Jaylen Brown. I'll take that. Build around Jaylen Brown and Ben Simmons, right? That's a nice duo of wings. But unless you're in that situation where you get Donovan Mitchell, you build around that boy immediately, and you got something good. That's the only situation where I see them not building around Ben Simmons because of the way the contracts are laid out. You can't have two players on your roster. You can't trade for two players who've signed that designated rookie max extension. I think that needs to get revisited in the CBA because that don't make any damn sense. I mean, the Nets would have paid KD to Miami if there was a way they could get Bam Adebayo back. You know what I'm saying? If they could have got Bam, they would have done that deal, I think. But they can't get Bam. They can't get Donovan Mitchell in a KD deal because you have Ben Simmons on that roster. So that's something I think will be revisited for sure.
No doubt, bro. And just because I'm genuinely curious, but do you have any insight on the Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant relationship at all? Just because there have been plenty of reports telling us that they're not any longer besties, and I've seen Skip Bayless talk about how he thinks that relationship has just fallen off a cliff. Do you know if they're still like close like this?
I don't know a damn thing. You know, I don't know. I'm not one of those guys that's going to pretend to know these guys better than I do. But I do know from everything Kevin Durant has said in the past that their relationship is far beyond basketball. Right, those are actually friends, and for a lot of the summer, Kyrie was just trying to get his money. Right, he's trying to get the best deal that he could possibly get, and Kevin Durant was backing him in that. I don't think that their friendship has fallen apart, as some of these guys might say. You know, I think they're still close, but that's just me thinking. I don't have any direct insight onto what their friendship might be. Them guys ain't talking to me.
Okay, I'd have to agree. Just because if they were that close before, I don't think any of the things that they gone through or that they went through last year would just all of a sudden, impact the relationship. Because if they were really like that, then that wouldn't, that would be minor.
Here's an example. We just saw Kevin Durant and James Harden at Travis Scott's concert having fun together. James Harden left Kevin Durant mid-season, basically ended that season for them. There's no way they would win the championship after that James Harden trade, and they're still cool. If him and James Harden are still cool, I don't think there's any way that him and Kyrie Irving can't still be cool, but I could be wrong.
No, you hit the nail on the head. But just speaking of Kyrie Irving real quick, bro, if it's not the Nets, are the Lakers the only real logical landing spot? Or
do you think
my
read on the situation, I don't think there's any team that'd be willing to take a risk like that. Kyrie has a track record of playing well next to LeBron James, right? Like that makes sense. I don't think there's maybe the Miami Heat, right? Maybe Miami tries to do that.
Jimmy.
Yeah, I've already seen. I think I tweeted about it. I think Jimmy Butler was asked during an All-Star weekend, who's the one player he wants to play with, and he said Kyrie. I think that would make sense. But I don't. I think at this point, a lot of teams are scared away by that by Kyrie, just because of his unpredictable appearance habits. We'll call that. You never know if he's going to play or not. Well, I think he's going to play, but there's certain times where he doesn't play, and he feels justified in not playing because he's an elite player, right? And I don't know. I don't know if I agree. I agree with him being an elite player. I don't think that should be reason for him not to play 82 games in a year, right? Like, what happened to the time when players like to play all possible games, right?
That's what I'm saying.
So, but to your question, yeah, if a team is going to trade for Kyrie, I think it's the Lakers or the Heat. I don't think any other team makes sense.
Okay, and then final question, bro. Sorry to take up so much of your time, but
we good.
So we've been talking about Ben Simmons, Kyrie, and KD this entire time. I want to talk about somebody else who's been flying under the radar. I don't even think we've talked about him once, throughout the course of this show. But Cam Thomas, once again, he lit up Summer League to the tune of 27.4 points per game. What are your expectations for him going into year 2? And do you finally see him cracking the lineup consistently?
No, just because you still have Kyrie, you still have Seth Curry, you still have Patty Mills. Right, and you have a healthy Joe Harris now. I think all the minutes at the guard spot are going to go to those four, unless Kyrie decides he doesn't want to go to work tomorrow. Then Cam Thomas is going to end up with some minutes. Right, if somebody gets hurt, yeah, it'll be Cam Thomas's time. But just because of the nature of the game, there's only but so many minutes, and you just gave Patty Mills a new deal. Seth Curry proved already that he can play. He deserves time. Joe Harris is going to play. Kyrie's going to play. Ben Simmons is going to play probably some minutes at the guard spot. I think it's tough to find minutes for him, but that doesn't mean he can't play. I don't know. I don't see him being a regular part of the rotation just because you've got 4 guards already ahead of him in the rotation, and there's only but so minutes you can pass around. But he looks good, right? If there's a world where Kyrie isn't on the team anymore, I think that definitely opens up minutes for Cam Thomas, right? But as long as we're talking about a world where Kyrie's on the team, I don't know how Cam Thomas can play more than garbage time minutes where, then either the Nets are up big or they're down big or you're putting it, or maybe it's just the team has no energy, especially if Steve Nash is head coach, right? His rotations can be unpredictable. So who knows what happens.
Yes, sir. Hey, but Kristian, man, you know what they say, time flies when you're having fun. That just about wraps up the show. But before we go, Kristian, please plug yourself, bro. The floor is yours. Talk about what you got coming up next. Plug your social media handles. Anything you want to talk about?
Sure. I'm with the New York Daily News. I cover the Nets and the NBA. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Blast, Instagram at Chris Blast. Coming up, I got a story really just about why Kevin Durant and the Nets really need each other for this whole thing, right? And it's a lot of what I discussed on the podcast. If Kevin Durant goes somewhere, that means they gave up. Well, it'll make them a championship contender. If the Nets trade Kevin Durant, that means that they don't want to be a championship contender anymore and that they're satisfied with the status quo, which is not acceptable for season ticket holders who bought tickets because they saw Kevin Durant on the signage, right? Like if you were a season ticket holder and you saw them promoting Kevin Durant and you bought your tickets and now they're talking about they don't even want them, you're going to be pissed. So writing about that. And the season's about to start up. Training camp is starting soon, and I'm going to be all over it. So follow me on Twitter, Chris Splash. Pick up a copy of the New York Daily News. And that's all I got.
Hey, y'all be sure to follow that man. A whole bunch of game, whole bunch of everything. You don't want to miss out. And especially once training camp comes around, whether or not KD pulls up, I mean, he's gonna have a lot to talk about.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be super
Facts. And so, to everybody out there, again, from the New York Daily News, Kristian Winfield. This has been your host, Steezy A. Smith. We sign off. Have a blessed one, y'all.
My God. Appreciate you, bro.